This will sound very strange, but Canada Day, the birthday of Canada on July 1st in 2021, the day that the historic town of Lytton in British Columbia, Canada, burned to the ground on the day that it experienced the hottest temperature ever recorded in Canada at 49 Celsius in an area that was struck with an unprecedented 700,000 lightning strikes in 15 hours that induced a forest fire storm pyroconvective event that sent smoke into the upper atmosphere, which was equivalent to a large volcanic eruption, is a most important prophecy that is predicting that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, her Air Force Two plane, caused by turbulence, lightning, and a bird strike in St. Louis as she flies across the country on February 2nd or 3rd, 2024. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. As can be seen in this email, the prediction that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash has been known since at least August 5th, 2021. July 1st, 2021 was the 154th anniversary of Canada. It was the completion of Canada's 153rd anniversary year. On this prophetic anniversary of Canada, we received the massively prophetic signs that were anticipated in advance. Just for one example among numerous examples, prior to July 1st, I made a video predicting a massive judgment sign of destruction on Canada to occur on July 1st. And I demonstrated that one of the many reasons for knowing this in advance is that July 1st was exactly 6 times 6 times 6 months after the company Tesla was founded. In Bible prophecy, the number 666 is associated with the Antichrist, and God is using the company Tesla as lightning symbolism. And referring to the Antichrist, Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. This prediction was documented ahead of time in the video on this channel titled Elon Musk Transhumanism Prophecy. Prior to July 1st, I knew that the barge on the Niagara River would either go over the falls on July 1st or that there would be another major prophetic sign on this date involving Canada. Then, as was predicted, on July 1st occurred the unprecedented 700,000 lightning strikes in 15 hours. This 700,000 lightning strikes occurred as predicted 6 times 6 times 6 months after Tesla was founded, which is lightning symbolism. According to the North American Lightning Detection Network, this was the equivalent of 5% of lightning strikes in the huge nation of Canada in an average year. And these signs are the monumental prophetic signs that signal the beginning of judgment and destruction on the nation of Canada in the end times period, the period of time that precedes the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ in the autumn of 2024. And these signs occurred on the anniversary of Canada at the end of her 153rd anniversary year. The number 153 symbolizes the end of the age, as it was in Jesus' last miracle that 153 fish were caught in the net. 153 fish symbolizes the harvest of souls at the end of the age of fishing for men. This is why the extremely prophetic judgment signs that occurred on July 1st, 2021, which I will explain in a minute, occurred on the completion of Canada's 153rd anniversary year. Like America, Canada was God's Gentile nation and was the most blessed nation in the history of the world. When a nation that has known God decides to turn away from God, its judgment and destruction is commensurate with the amount of blessings it received. The same is true for each individual. We will be judged on Judgment Day relative to the amount of light and truth that we had the opportunity to receive in our lifetime. America, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand were the most blessed nations in history. God used these nations in the 19th and 20th centuries to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ around the world. However, at the same time that Christianity is now exploding in China, India, and Latin America, because Catholicism isn't the Bible or true Christianity, Canada is in the early stages of what will soon become severe persecution of its few remaining Christians. Today, Canada is a spiritual wasteland. Its cup of iniquity is now overflowing, and it is most assuredly deserving of the wrath of God. The nation of Canada's response to COVID-19 is a manifestation of its utterly sick spiritual condition. Many things could be said regarding the many ways in which Canada has departed from God. That is the subject of another video. And if you are interested in truth, and this concept is new to you, I pray that you seek out truth and wisdom while you are still able to, before the godless, anti-God Canadian authorities remove all truth from the internet. If you scoff at the notion that this level of intellectual authoritarianism could be possible in Canada, you are simply lacking in wisdom and are naive to the current level of censorship and how spiritually dark the times currently are and will become very soon. These predictions will prove everything I am saying, and saying what I have just said is the reason why God is giving me a voice through this prediction. What I have just said is the purpose of this prediction that is from God. All right, what you just listened to was recorded in 2021. It is now October of 2023, and so much more has come to light regarding the understanding of how July 1st, 2021 fits into God's big picture of signs here, which is ultimately leading to these predictions, which will prove the matter, which is the purpose of the prediction, to prove that everything that I'm saying in this video is true. The reason why God has given me a voice through the prediction is to prove these things. And the prediction is that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis on October 17th, 2023. This video explains some of the amazing and important prophetic signs that the righteous Christian God of the Bible used to point to October 17th, 2023 regarding the prediction that U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. Here is the email and forensic notes document that indicate that the prediction for Harris's plane crash on October 17th, 2023 was known since July 6th, 2023. In fact, it has been known since October of 2020 that Harris will die in a plane crash so that Barack Obama can become the president again. God pointed to October 17th, ahead of October 17th, and so it was believed that Harris's predicted plane crash would be on October 17th. As explained in the Gaza explosion video, the extremely profound prophetic signs that occurred on October 17th, 10:17, revealed adding 3 sets of 7 days to reach November 7th, 11:7. The signs on 11:7 in turn revealed a trail of signs that continued on through other dates, and this trail of signs is predicted to ultimately end on February 2nd or 3rd, 2024. This trail of signs that I am referring to is explained in the must-watch Gaza explosion video. That said, October 17th was the bigger date. October 17th was supremely important, and the signs on 10:17 pointed to Zechariah chapter 1 verse 17 in the Bible. The Gaza explosion video explains how the signs on 1017 pointed to Zechariah 1:17. Zechariah 1:17 was also hinted at with the date 11:7, which again was a prophetic 3 sets of 7 days after 1017. Furthermore, from 11:7, the trail of signs regarding Harris's predicted plane crash continued on to the date 1:7, and this too was another hint at Zechariah 1:17. The reason why God used October 17th, the date 1017, to point to Zechariah 1:17 is that this important prophecy in Zechariah chapter 1 in the Bible is dated. And the date of this prophecy is recorded in Zechariah chapter 1 verse 7, 1:7. And the date 1017 also hints at this. The prophet Zechariah recorded the precise date on which he received the prophecy from God. The date was the 24th day of the month of Shevat in the Hebrew calendar. This year in 2024, the 24th day of Shevat begins at sunset on February 2nd and goes to sunset February 3rd. In other words, God used many different profound trails of signs to lead to October 17th, 2023, in order to reveal the date on which Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, the 24th day of the month of Shevat, which is February 2nd or 3rd, 2024. So again, there were a number of profound reasons why I knew that something very important would happen, and specifically Canada, on this July 21st date. And it wasn't only because it was the anniversary of Canada that led me to believe this. And like I explained, one of the reasons was that it was exactly 6 plus 6 plus 6 years, which is also 6 times 6 times 6 months, which hints at the number of the Antichrist, 666, after the company Tesla was founded. And the company Tesla I already knew before this date is symbolism for lightning, and in the Bible, lightning is symbolism for the Antichrist. And furthermore, the first name of the Antichrist, Barak, in Hebrew means lightning. And furthermore, he was born on the 216th day of the calendar year, August 4th, and this is 216 months. 6 times 6 times 6 months is 216 months. Okay, so that was why this was known ahead of time. I even made a video talking about how it was connected to Tesla before this date. And then, lo and behold, we had this most astounding event, which was an unprecedented 700,000 lightning strikes in a 24-hour period. Or rather, I think it was a 12 or 15-hour period. It was the storm over the night. And there's a reason for this storm at night, because the town that burned at the same time as the lightning strikes in Western Canada, in British Columbia, the town's name is Lytton. And Lytton is named after the British politician that is famous for the most, or is known for the most famous incipit in history. And if you don't know what an incipit is, back in the day, there were not titles for works, for books, for music. The titles of pieces of were in fact the first line of the document. And so that's what an incipit is. It's the way in which a piece of work will be known as through its first line. And the first line of one of the most famous first lines is, "It was a dark and stormy night." And the author of that is this man named Lytton, I think his name is William Lytton, but I forget now. Actually, the author and politician's name is Edward Lytton. And another note that I forgot to mention the first time I recorded this is that the town Lytton is historic. And there's a reason why that's symbolic. God would use a symbolic historic town. This is a historic village named Lytton. It's historic because it was on the Transcontinental Railroad, and if you know Canadian history, the Transcontinental Railroad is what made Canada and brought in the western provinces, such as British Columbia, into Canada. In other words, the apocalyptic burning of Lytton, British Columbia, is symbolism for judgment, destruction for Canada. I'll know it in a second, and it's also later in this video. So the point is that that's quite interesting coincidence, is that we had this dark and stormy night that burned Lytton, and the man is named after the British politician, one of the founders of British Columbia, and he is known for "It was a dark and stormy night." All right, now the reason why I just emphasized British Columbia and this British politician is the underlying deeper meaning or reason prophetically for why God pointed to this town Lytton. It was to point to this doctor, this British doctor, British Canadian doctor with a British accent, that is the doctor for Lytton, British Columbia, Canada, who, since the CVD disease, has become internationally famous for being the first to discover a certain something. And that will be explained in part 2. This doctor's name begins with a Charles and ends with an Hoffe. And God did all of this dark and stormy night and this apocalyptic burning of Lytton, to point to this British doctor. And this will be explained more in part 2 of this video, which is absolutely a must watch. And obviously, if I'm saying that this is the deeper, important reason why God was pointing to Lytton through all of this, then therefore you should know that you should watch part 2. Also, the town burned after reaching a record high temperature for Canada at 49 degrees. And this is very prophetic because 49 is 7 times 7, and we had 700,000 lightning strikes. The very huge prophetic thing here is that this is a parallel with the book of Joshua in the Bible, when the Israelites marched around the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho before they collapsed in God's judgment. They did so in a symbolic 3 sets of 7. They enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7, as was instructed by God. They marched around once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day, they marched 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. It was, in fact, a 7 followed by a 7 times 7. And that's exactly what we have here on this Canada Day, the first day of the 7th month. But that's not what I even was wanting to get at. We have the 700,000 lightning strikes and the temperature of 7 times 7, 49 degrees Celsius. But what is also very, very important here is that this was on the other side of the border wall of security of America. America is God's Gentile nation for which he is demonstrating judgment warning signs. There are only 2 nations in the history of the world that were founded on a relationship with God, Israel and America. And God is communicating these signs, including signs on the other side of the border wall of security. For example, there were these prophetic earthquakes on the southern side of the border wall of security in Mexico, and archaeology proves that the walls of security of Jericho collapsed due to an earthquake. Furthermore, I think that's inferred in the text personally. I think that would be how the walls would collapse. But God arranged the earthquake to happen at that moment when they blew the trumpets. So we are ultimately talking about the rise of the Antichrist, hence the lightning symbolism, through the death of the 49th Vice President, Kamala Harris, when it is predicted that she will die in a plane crash on October 17th. And her fall from the sky in a plane crash will symbolize, and then her replacement with the Antichrist will symbolize when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. In fact, the name Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barack in Hebrew means lightning, Bama means high place, and O, the language Jesus would have spoken in Aramaic, means from. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist, and obviously the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And so that's why in this case, it is astounding that we have this connection with this 700,000 lightning strikes to the symbolic lightning falling from heaven, or Satan falling like lightning from heaven, when Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. Now, the thing is that America will be judged through the Antichrist, and that'll be through the death of the 49th Vice President. But this judgment is also the walls of security collapsing on America. And that is symbolized with the border walls of security, including the northern border. Currently, there is an invasion on the southern border, and that's also symbolic and pointing to prophetic and pointing to the book of Joshua and a symbolism there. But in this case, it's on the northern border, on the other side of the northern border with Canada, and that border is the 49th parallel. It is the 49th latitudinal line. And this sign occurred when the temperature reached 49 Celsius and 700,000 lightning strikes. In other words, this is a second witness. The 49th parallel is what it is all about here, this prophetic sign, which is pointing to Joshua and the 7 followed by a 7 times 7, which is why the 700,000 lightning strikes occurred just on the other side of the border wall of security, which is the 49th parallel, which is 7 times 7. Okay, now, all of this dark and stormy night prophetic symbolism here occurred on the same day, July 1st, as 2 prophetic tornadoes touched down in Washington, D.C., where the Antichrist will rise to power. Also, these events here with the apocalyptic burning of Lytton, British Columbia, a town named after the founder of British Columbia, it hints at there's a parallel here between British Columbia and the tornado in the District of Columbia. God uses the name Columbia throughout his big picture of prophetic signs because it symbolizes America. The path of the tornado, the first one, made an uncanny line right down the narrow National Mall. There's the strip of property that's narrow and long that is the National Mall that leads to the Capitol building, and that's exactly where the tornado went down. It just happened to go down the National Mall, past the Washington Monument, for example, and it stopped just 2 blocks shy of the White House. All right? It pointed to the White House. The path of the tornado was 4.4 miles. The touchdown of the tornado was 4.4 miles, And that hinted at the 44th president in the White House, the Antichrist, which is again why it happened on the day of the lightning, because Barak in Hebrew means lightning. I'll just say this quickly. Jesus said in Luke 10:18 that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. And the name Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barak means lightning, Bama means high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven, as it is said, for example, that Lucifer fell from the high place. And in the language Jesus would have spoken, the word for from is O. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And so that's why on the day of the lightning, on the other side of the border wall of security, the 49th parallel, the 4.4-mile tornado touched down in Washington, D.C., and stopped right in front of the White House. The tornado touched down at 9 p.m. and had wind speeds of 90 miles per hour. That's a typo, 90 miles per hour. Now, the reason for that is that God pairs 9 and 110 together to confirm the signs and connections. And I'll just take a quick minute to explain this, and then I'll be right back, and I'll explain the other prophetic sign that was unrelated to weather that happened in Washington, D.C., which was the collapse of a building, which is more Joshua symbolism. All right, but yes, I'll just play the quick clip and I'll be right back. All right, before I take that quick minute to explain the prophetic significance of the number 9 paired with the number 110 here, just a couple more things before we move on. This sign in the District of Columbia on July 1st, 2021 was the day of the official beginning of the 6th day of the first month committee, the infamous 6th day of the first month committee, the witch trial, if you will, for President Trump. Okay, so this is all about getting Trump, but the word Trump in archaic English means trumpet, or the sounding of a trumpet. And the Israelites blew trumpets before the walls of security collapsed. In fact, as I said, they marched around once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they marched 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. And then the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. And on this July 1st date, the date of this Trump committee, there were 700,000 lightning strikes on the other side of the 49th parallel, a 7 times 7. And again, it burned Lytton at 49 degrees, the record, and God uses records in his signs. And 49 degrees is 7 times 7. And in other words, all of this here, these signs here, are related to the prophetic sign that is President Trump, whose presidency and election campaign were synonymous with his border wall of security. And I actually could play a clip to explain more about that. Even his pick of Mike Pence hints at trumpets. And he was elected with 77 electoral votes, 73 days before he was inaugurated, 73 hints at 3 sets of 7. On the day that he was elected, the leader of Israel, which is symbolism for the leader of the Israelites, Joshua, was in power for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. And on Trump's inauguration day, Trump was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old, and on and on. And so, anyway, we have the beginning of the Trump witch trial, the show trial, and which is coinciding with this 3 sets of 7. Also, this first official day of the 6th day of the first month committee was exactly 4 times 44 days after the 6th day of the first month, the big event for which this committee is about. 4 times 44 days hints at the 44th president, and 4 times 44 days after the 6th day of the first month, and the beginning of the 6th day of the first month committee was the day of the 4.4 mile tornado in the District of Columbia. It's quite clear that all of this is pointing to trumpeting judgment for America, the collapsing of America's walls of security with the arrival of the Antichrist, the 44th president. One last thing before we move on is that in Bible prophecy, the period of the Antichrist is symbolized by 42 months. And July 1st, 2021 was a symbolic beginning of the final 42 months, because the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ will be in October of 2024. That will be followed by the festival of Hanukkah, which is symbolism for the rededication of the temple. And day 8, because the festival is 8 days, the 8th day of Hanukkah will be January 2nd, 2025. In other words, the beginning of January in 2025. Therefore, the final 42 months before the Messianic age, the 1,000 years of peace, during which Jesus will rule from Jerusalem, began in July, and July 1st, for that matter, a symbolic beginning of the month. And that's the final 42 months before the second coming and the defeat of the Antichrist 42 months later. Well, not precisely, because the precise second coming and the Antichrist's defeat on the Day of Atonement in 2024 is October 12th. But it is a symbolic 42 months from this beginning of July to the beginning of January in 2025, which will be the symbolic beginning of the Messianic age. And the prediction being made in this video will prove this. This is the purpose. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove this. I know a lot of people are scratching their head with, what is he talking about with a symbolic 42 months? But this is a fact, and the prediction will prove it. And this is the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, is to prove this. To miss this, to not appreciate this, is to miss entirely the point of the prediction. The point of the prediction is to prove the controversial things that I am saying. Make no mistake. And the second coming is in 2024. Case closed when the prediction comes to pass. Believe me, I know far better than you why God has provided this prediction, and it is to prove these things. And one more thing before we move on here. I'm about to explain why God pairs 110 and 9 together to confirm the signs and connections. But just jumping ahead, this date here, although not shown in this diagram, this May 23rd, 2019 date, is 9 days exactly after the May 14th date. And that was the date that Trump trumpeted a return to the moon by 2024. And I won't explain that in this video because that's another video entirely. But God was using Trump's trumpeting a return to the moon by 2024 as a prophetic sign, communicating that the return of Lord Jesus Christ will be in 2024. The moon symbolizes Christ. It is a giant rock. Rock in the Bible is symbolism for Jesus. And the sun symbolizes God the Father, and the sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. And thus watching the moon is important in the Bible, the timing of the moon, and it is symbolism for watching for the timing of the Lord's return, which includes watching prophetic moon signs, and especially the Trump trumpeting the return to the moon by 2024. Anyway, that 9 days gets us to this date, followed by 110 weeks, which gets us to this date with the tornado at 9 p.m. at 90 miles per hour, and on, and followed by another 110 days, and there's another 110 months after this, so that'll now be explained. Actually, one last thing is that, speaking of prophetic anniversaries of a nation, that date I just mentioned, the May 14th, 2019 date, was the anniversary of Israel. Israel's rebirth. It was its 71st anniversary. And on that day, the historic heritage tree at the Washington Monument fell due to wet soil, because on that same day it was reported in the news that Washington, D.C. had received its wettest 365-day period in its history, and it received in that period 71.05 inches of rain, and this 365-day period just happened to line up exactly with Israel's 71st year. But this is explained more in other videos. Jesus' official arrival into Jerusalem and first coming was on the 10th day of the first month in the Hebrew calendar. This is 110, and this hints at the number 110. In the book of Joshua, the date on which the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan River and officially entered the Promised Land was also on the 10th day of the first month, which is 110 and hints at the number 110. Jesus' first coming is symbolized by the number 110. This is why on 9/11, the two towers that collapsed were each 110 stories high. The collapse of two towers that were 110 floors was symbolism for Jesus' second coming. In the book of Joshua in the Bible, Joshua died at the age of 110. Joshua led the Hebrews around the security walls of the ancient city of Jericho before they collapsed in judgment. On 9/11, the Twin Towers, which were 110 stories high, collapsed, engendering a small earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall, where George Washington was inaugurated, on Wall Street. President George Washington was a founding father, and his inauguration as the first president was a symbolic founding of the nation. The cracking of the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street on 9/11 symbolized America's foundation in God being cracked. This is because after Washington's inauguration at Federal Hall, he then walked down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel, where he consecrated the nation to God, saying that if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its blessings. After 9/11, Trinity Chapel was called the Miracle Chapel, as it was the only building at Ground Zero to have survived. It did not even suffer a broken window due to the 70-year-old sycamore tree that was uprooted as it sheltered the chapel from the falling debris. In commemoration of this sycamore tree outside the chapel, today there is a huge bronze statue of its roots. In other words, through the 9/11 events, God was pointing to Trinity Chapel and Washington's covenantal consecration of the nation to God at Trinity Chapel. Wall Street is named after the original 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. The collapse of 110 floors that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, which is named after a 9-foot-high security wall, hints at 9/11 and points to Joshua, who died at 110, and the Hebrews that marched around the walls of security before they collapsed in judgment. 110 floors and the 9-foot-high wall of security that was Wall Street points to George Washington's march down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel that symbolized a covenantal relationship between America and God. To this effect, Washington's march down Wall Street with the New York Stock Exchange, the building that symbolizes America's financial strength, located on one side of the street, and Federal Hall, the building that symbolizes America's governmental and institutional strength on the other side, also pointed to the cutting rights ritual practiced in ancient Israel that was used in Abraham's and God's ritual walk in their covenant that is described in Genesis 15. A covenant that symbolizes Washington's walk down Wall Street and his covenantal consecration of the nation to God at Trinity Chapel. There are only two nations in the history of the world that were founded not on ethnicity or territory or language, but were founded solely for God, Israel and America. In every daily Bible that is divided into 365 readings, a portion of the Bible for each day of the year, on every September 11th, everyone that reads this standard 365-day Bible reads the passage in the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verse 11, which is the judgment warning on ancient Israel, which was a raid on ancient Israel by the world's first recorded terrorists, the ancient Assyrians. And the terrorists on 9/11 were from the same part of the world. The Assyrians raided the northern kingdom of Israel first, and then later the southern kingdom of Judah was destroyed, which is why the terrorists on 9/11 hit the North Tower first, followed 17 minutes later by the South Tower. And this Isaiah 9:11 passage includes a mention of collapsed buildings and uprooted sycamore trees. On the morning after 9/11, Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle gave a speech to the world regarding the events on 9/11. He quoted the passage in Isaiah 9:11, not realizing it was a judgment warning on the ancient Jews. He quoted how, after the raid by the Assyrians, the Hebrews did not repent to God, but instead vowed defiantly to rebuild and become stronger than before. And so, like the ancient Jews, America did not repent after the judgment warning, and instead defied God even more. And so, like ancient Israel, America will now be destroyed. This is why, in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, he frequently pairs together the number 110 and the number 9. Both of these numbers symbolize God's judgment on the nation, and paired together, these numbers point to the big judgment warning that was 9/11. As well, these numbers paired together in God's signs and connections serve as a witness confirmation that the perceived signs and connections are from God. After the judgment warning of 9/11, America was given a period of grace to repent and turn back to God, or else judgment destruction. In the Bible, a 20-year period symbolizes a complete period of waiting. Jacob waited 20 years to get possession of his wives and property. The children of Israel waited 20 years to be freed of Jabin, the king of Canaan, when they were freed from bondage by Deborah and Barak. The Ark of the Covenant waited 20 years in Kiriath Jearim, and Solomon spent 20 years building his home and the house of God. On the 20th anniversary of the buildings that collapsed on 9/11 was the sudden collapse of America's presence in Afghanistan, and the iconic scene of this was the U.S. Air Force plane leaving the airport in Afghanistan, and the big number on the side of its plane is 1109, which hints at 110 and 9. Okay, so the reason for the 9 p.m. and 90 miles per hour tornado is to confirm this 110 days connection, which I will explain, and also this 110 weeks connection, which connects with the 110 months connection. Because this prophetic tornado touchdown was exactly, which I should say this tornado that touched down at 9 p.m. with 90-mile winds, was exactly 110 weeks after the extremely prophetic tornado warning in the Capitol building on this date. So I'll get back to that. I just wanted to get that out of the way because of the prophetic significance of the 9 p.m. of the tornado. One other thing before moving on is that there was another prophetic sign, and it was the collapse of this building on Kennedy Street. Okay, Kennedy Well, let me see. How can I say this? God is pointing to his voice, which is why RFK Jr. is losing his voice. Or not losing his voice, but has an issue with his voice. It is symbolic of how he is God's voice speaking truth. And that is all I will say. You will have to infer the rest. But I will say also this, the location of this building that collapsed, which is again relevant because it's Joshua collapsing of security symbolism, right? Joshua walls of security symbolism. It occurred on the state. It occurred on Kennedy Street in Washington, D.C., completely unrelated to the weather. But it was at 916 Kennedy Street, and that's because God is pointing to Isaiah chapter 9, verse 16, which I will just read. For the leaders of this people cause them to err, make errors, and those who are led by them are destroyed. Okay, I think that really sums up what we were talking about with Kennedy's message regarding the truth, regarding the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist. The thing is the mark of the Antichrist. It is a spiritual abomination. And when you listen to Kennedy, because the propaganda tells you not to, you will learn many other things regarding the thing industry, which are very alarming. And it's one reason why the thing is the mark of the Antichrist. It's a wake-up call for those, including myself, that had heard about these others talking about the things. Not just the current one, but the ones in the past, and how they were bad, and how they were causing harm. Well, it's all true. But we deserved the thing, the judgment from this current thing, because we were not listening to the mothers that were talking about the thing that had done terrible things to their children in prior decades. Okay. So that's why 916 Kennedy Street, because I'll read it again. For the leaders of this people cause them to err, and those who are led by them are destroyed. All right. It's talking about the Antichrist and the system, the Antichrist system and the leaders in it. Okay? All right. So it's very, very profound there. All right. Now, to go back in time, we go back 110 weeks, we get the prophetic tornado warning. And this warning in the Capitol building occurred right as the Senate was voting on the aid relief package for the disasters that had happened in the second half of 2017, including the 3 prophetic hurricanes, and the California firestorm, which killed 44 people over 4 days. And it was 44 days after Hurricane Harvey, which was a Category 4, that hit 4 days after the Great American Eclipse and dumped 4 feet of water over the 4th biggest city in the U.S. over 4 days. And in other words, all of these, that was the 4th witness sign, and the 3 hurricanes were all witness signs to the judgment warning of the Great American Eclipse, which occurred in August of 2017. And that's why the prophetic tornado warning that occurred right in the middle of them voting on it, and then they had to seek emergency weather shelter in the Capitol building. There was also an Antichrist sign on this day, or 2 of them actually. Obama tweeted how he had visited the Washington Nationals baseball team youth academy, and there is the photo of him with the youth and the counselors kneeling all around him, which is symbolic of kneeling to Satan. And it is, of course, the team from the Capitol, the baseball team, so it's national symbolism. And also on this day, SpaceX launched its first batch of the Starlink satellites. And at the time, they had announced that they were going to launch, I think it was 44 of them on average per month or something. But it was a prophetic, I can't remember everything, and I can't remember all of the details, but SpaceX anyway is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, because the X is symbolic of the mark, and also SpaceX and Elon Musk is transhumanism technology symbolism, which is the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, and so that's this. Also, by the way, another 9, this was 9 days after the heritage tree collapsed at the Washington Monument due to the soil being too wet. And that was at the end, well, I'm not going to go off onto that trail. Well, it was at the end of the 71st anniversary of Israel, and there was also reported on that same day the wettest 365-day period in Washington, D.C., and it just happened to be 71.05 inches of rain, and it lined up with Israel's 71st year. And so anyway, well, also it says the tweet from the National Park Service came at 9:20 a.m. and I think it's Genesis 9:20, in which it says that Noah became after the flood a man of the soil. And Washington, because this tree collapsed at Washington Monument, was known for being a horticulturalist, a man of the soil. And so anyway, it's amazing, but I think to do it more justice would be to need to explain it some more. But the point is that all of this thing, mark of the Antichrist symbolism, is ultimately it connects back. This date connects with another 110, but it's 110 months to the day that Obama signed his Obamacare, the thing his presidency is most known for, nationalized health care. And this is because socialism and collectivism is evil, because ultimately it inevitably leads to the trampling of human rights of the individual, always. And it is evil. It's not what God intended, collectivism, and it isn't what Western civilization was founded on. But it is ultimately spiritual evil. Marxism is spiritually rooted in Satan. And anyway, also, the reason for the nationalized health care is this is how the Antichrist, Obama, will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which is, of course, related to health care. Okay? And so that's the reason for these prophetic connections here. So, as I explained, God pairs 9 and 110 together, and exactly 90 months after Obamacare was signed was the day that Trump, God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs, trumpeted his disapproval of McCain from the 48th state, hence the 48th president, and his vote on that day regarding the repeal of Obamacare. Well, McCain, the rhino, Republican in name only, not true conservative, the troublemaker in the Republican Party, he, on this day, who is more concerned about his image and himself than he is about doing the right thing with his voting. He just wants to be the renegade, and he likes that image. But anyway, McCain voted on this day to not repeal Obamacare, and that was that. That was the end of the effort to repeal Obamacare, which was very bad and is leading to the mark of the Antichrist, nationalized health care, as I just mentioned. So that was the day of that. But also it was the day of the Revelation chapter 12 sign in the night sky. And that is the sign that symbolizes or depicts the rapture. That's what the prophecy is about in Revelation chapter 12. And the rapture, if you don't know, is the evacuation of God's faithful from the severe persecution of the Antichrist, which will be through nationalized health care and the enforcement of the mark of the Antichrist, which is why this Obamacare sign occurred on the day of the Revelation 12 sign in the night sky. And exactly 90 months, which connects with this 110 months connection. But also, God pairs 9 and 11 to confirm the signs and connections. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, and this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And when we think about it, one way in which he would provide a second witness would be simply through pairing certain numbers together, a really simple way of doing this. And this is the case, and he pairs 9 and 11 to point to the 9/11 judgment warning in 2001. All right. So that's why we have the 90 months followed by the 11 months connection, and it is valid because of the pairing of the numbers, but also it is valid because the two dates are related, because this is also another mark of the Antichrist prophetic sign. This was August 23rd, 2020, and it furthermore was a 9/11 sign, hence the 90 months followed by 11 months. This was the day that the London Tower Bridge would not draw. I mean, so the bridge dysfunctioned and it would not close properly, and so traffic was backed up because it's a drawbridge, okay? And so something happened, I forget what, but the power went out or something, and the drawbridge wasn't working. And this is an America sign, not only because it hints at 9/11 with the two identical towers on each side of the river, the Thames River in London, with the London Tower Bridge, two towers, but also David Blaine, which God has used as symbolism for 9/11 and the towers. David Blaine, okay, well, let me just talk about Blaine just for a second. Blaine was born on the date 4/4 in 1973, the date that the towers officially opened. And he hung in his stunt in a plexiglass box from the London Tower Bridge for 44 days. And that's why he was born on the date 4/4, on the day that the Twin Towers officially opened. This is amazing. Okay, that he did it. His stunt went for 44 days. He had no food for 44 days in the plexiglass. So, in the plexiglass box, he hung next to the London Tower Bridge over the Potter's Field Park. Okay, the Potter's Field Park. And who was hung above the Potter's Field? Who hung himself and the money went to buy? So, okay, it was Judas that betrayed Jesus. He hung himself, and then the money he threw back at the Pharisees into the temple, and then they used it to buy the Potter's Field. And Blaine hung above the Potter's Field. But after 9/11, after the CVD disease in March of 2020, they were piling up the bodies and burying them in the Potter's Field in New York City. Okay? And this is 2020. This was when all of this was happening. And on this day, it was announced in the media that there were 23 million cases of the CVD disease worldwide, and that in the last 24 hours in the US, there were 44,000 new cases. That is amazing because God pairs 23 and 44 together frequently as these second witnesses to the signs and connections. Because the 44th president was the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. Okay, and furthermore, this 44,000 cases hints at Blaine, who hung at the Tower Bridge for 44 days. Also, this was would have been the 42nd birthday of Kobe Bryant. And when we say Kobe in Hebrew, it sounds like CVD. It sounds like the CVD disease. And the reason why this is relevant is because one thing that God used Kobe Bryant for was to point to the mark of the Antichrist. Because Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash, And God is using the helicopters in his signs. One reason is the rotor blade on top of helicopters is an X. And as I mentioned earlier, the X is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist. Because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist, described in Ezekiel chapter 9, would have been a Tav mark. And in ancient Hebrew, the Tav letter is an X, or was an X. This is also why in Kobe Bryant's crash, 9 people died, and the helicopter departed at 9 a.m. And it crashed into the mountain, which is Bama in Hebrew, as I mentioned before, but on and on. Okay, so 42, because 42 months, which is hinted at with 42 years, in Bible prophecy is the symbolic period of the Antichrist, which, by the way, we are already well inside and began on May 2nd, 2021, but I won't explain that here. I'll only say that the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove what I just said. Make no mistake, the second coming is 1,260 days after that, on the Day of Atonement, on October 12, 2024. And to not appreciate that is to miss entirely the point of this prediction that is from God, and the point of this video and video channel. It is also, by the way, for the purpose of proving that the thing is the mark of the Antichrist. And it is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It does not need an additional something, like additional technology or false religious form of worship, or a new dispensational age, supposedly, that comes supposedly after all Christians will be raptured. In fact, one of the reasons why many quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist is that it is judgment for this particular doctrine, dispensationalism. As Jesus said in Revelation chapter 2, he is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works of this Nicolaitan doctrine that he hates. And one part of it is this dispensationalism doctrine. And if you are a Christian especially, or if not, you should still watch it anyway. But arguably the most important video on this channel is the 23 church signs video. Find it and make sure you watch it. I don't know what you're thinking after the prediction comes to pass if you don't watch that video, the 23 church signs video. Okay, so that's enough of that explanation. But the amazing thing here too is that, and David Blaine, by the way, more 9/11 symbolism, he is also known for the Guinness Book of World Records for holding his breath underwater on the Oprah Winfrey show for literally just a couple of seconds over 17 minutes. And that is because the two towers collapsed 17 minutes apart. And the reason for that is because of the two space shuttle disasters that occurred exactly 17 years apart. And, it was just almost exactly. They're commemorated on the same date because they happened just a couple of days apart in the calendar. And also, that is for the purpose of pointing to NASA's Apollo 17 mission, which was the last time that an American departed the moon, which symbolizes America's departure from Christ because the moon symbolizes Christ. The moon is a giant rock, and in the Bible, rock is symbolism for Jesus. And so that's why God has been using moon signs in his prophetic signs. And furthermore, watching the moon is important in the Bible, watching the timing of the moon. And this is symbolism for watching for the timing of the Lord's return through prophetic signs, including moon signs. Also, the sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at, but the sun's light the sun symbolizes God the Father, and the sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. Anyway, this prophetic date that was obviously CVD disease symbolism and mark of the Antichrist symbolism because of the X and Kobe Bryant, for one thing. This was exactly 999 months, which pairs with the 23 and pairs with the 44. God pairs 9 with 23 and 44 to confirm the signs and connections. And this was exactly 999 months after the day that John Rockefeller died on May 23rd, 1937. And John Rockefeller is symbolism for the thing, because John Rockefeller and his Rockefeller Institute were the pioneers in the thing industry. Okay, and I'll just say this too. The 50 to 100 million people that died in 1918 were the result of tests of their primitive thing at Fort Riley in Kansas with the World War I soldiers. All right? You can look that up more for yourself, but this is the reason for the Rockefeller death being exactly 999 months to this prophetic sign right here. So in other words, we've now established an enormous amount of mark of the Antichrist symbolism leading up to the day of the lightning in Lytton, the dark and stormy night. Now, in part 2 of this video, I will explain the deeper reason, the amazing, profound reason why God pointed to Lytton, British Columbia. Okay? By the way, it was the District of Columbia tornado on the day of the British Columbia. God uses Columbia in his signs for America symbolism too. Okay, but there's more to the story, and I'll leave it for part 2, which won't be on the channel that begins with a YT. It has the begins with a Y and also has a T in the name. You know what I'm talking about. The channel you can't speak on, right? So part 2 won't be on that channel. And furthermore, if you are watching this video on that channel, you need to get off that channel and onto the alternate platform before you don't have an opportunity to at some point. All right? So make sure you get into the habit of watching all of these videos on another channel. And when the prediction comes to pass, you will know, at least you should, that you need to watch every single minute of every video on this channel. Now, so this 110 months from Obamacare connects with the tornado warning, which connects with 110 weeks to the tornado, which connects with 110 days to this prophetic date, which was known to be expected in advance of another, like this date, it was also expected in advance to be very prophetic. This was the day of the plane crash in Harris County, just outside of Houston, and the plane was on its way to Game 4, okay, the 44th president, of the Boston-Houston playoff series, which was known for the 7 runs that were scored in the 9th inning, hence the connection to the 700,000 lightning strikes. But I explained all of this in another video, so I won't do it again, and you need to watch all the videos, like I just said. But also, this plane was an MD-87, a McDonnell Douglas Model 87, and the company that owned it was named 987 Investments, LLC. This is amazing because the main reason, the initial reason why I knew of this date ahead of time is that it was the anniversary of the stock market crash, Black Monday, in 1987. Hence the 987 and McDonnell Douglas 87. And it was a crash, and we had a plane crash that included the number 87, and furthermore 987, because 1987. And that's why it was for the purpose of adding 87 days to this date, which was also obviously known in advance. And this wasn't the only connection that made this obvious. And this day was also another prophetic plane crash, another mountain signs, and a sign involving 144 horses, which is why I said before this date, if it wasn't to be the date that Kamala Harris would die in a plane crash, there would be a sign involving the number 144, because I knew of this 144 days connection before this day came and went. And sure enough, there was the major national news story about the 144 horses that were rescued at the mountain stables, Rocky Mountain Stables at just near Rocky Mountain National Park, and on and on. Anyway, all of these signs and much more are explained in the absolute amazing must-watch American Pharaoh Prophecy video. Make sure you watch that video too. And that gets us to this date here, which was the day of a border wall of security sign. This was the day that Harris announced that there was 19 billion donated from various corporations to help with the border wall of security crisis, which was supposedly, according to her and people on the left, the living conditions in the other nations. But the truth of the matter is the source of the border wall of security crisis is America's relationship with God. It is spiritual, and as I have explained it is symbolism for the book of Joshua and the walls of security collapsing in God's judgment. Anyway, also at the same time, she was at the 9th Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles, which is near Joshua Tree National Park. And this day was the 7th day that the trail in Joshua Tree National Park, 49 Palms, was closed in order to allow access to bighorn sheep, for bighorn sheep to water. And when the walls of security collapsed in the book of Joshua, they blew trumpets before the walls collapsed, and they were made from bighorn sheep horns. And 49 palms and 7 days hints at the 7 days they marched, and then on the 7th day, 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. Again, it was a 7 followed by a 7 times 7. Hence the 49 palm trail, and then the 7 days of marching gets us to this date. And the trail is a hiking trail, which hints at the march, the trail that the Israelites made around the walls of Jericho. This is an amazing sign right here. Oh, and also on this day was the largest ever, God uses records for his signs, this was the largest ever caravan. First, and God uses firsts for his signs. It was the first day of the largest ever caravan leaving the southern Mexico City on its way, marching to the border wall of security. The invasion. All right, now this day was 7 times 7 days. Again, Joshua, right? 7 times 7. This date here, which was a 3 sets of 7 sign. There were 70 rescues in this unprecedented flooding in downtown St. Louis, and 70 rescues, and and also a section of the I-70 highway was flooded and shut down, and it happened to be where the U.S. Highway 370 intersects it, and 370 hints at 3 sets of 7, and all of this is because the I-70 highway is running across the country parallel to the parallel to the 70-mile wide path of totality of the Great American Eclipse that passed over St. Louis. That's a 3 sets of 7. Now, on this same day was the helicopter sign. Again, the helicopters with the rotor blades are symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. This was exactly 30 months after Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash, and this sign involving 30 Sea Dragon helicopters. The Navy has these helicopters named Sea Dragons. This hints at Revelation chapter 12 with the dragon being thrown down from heaven to earth. And it's Revelation. That's why the story here is how the Navy base in Virginia, because of the storm, was only given 12 minutes warning, and it happened during the shift change, so they didn't have time to move the Sea Dragon helicopters into the hangar. And so I believe there were 10 of them that suffered Class A damage. So big event. And anyway, this date too, 726, hints at the number 726th word in the concordance, which is the word rapture. And the Revelation chapter 12 sign, which involves the dragon waiting at the feet of the woman, is about the rapture. And so this is a rapture sign. And furthermore, the dragon attempts to drown the woman with a flood. And that's why the flooding in St. Louis. This is a major rapture sign. And anyway, the 12 minutes hinted at Revelation the rapture of the 144,000, which are made up, as it says in the prophecy, 12 times 12,000. So that's why the 12 minutes hinted at 12 times 12,000 minutes, 144,000 minutes, to this prophetic sign here, another aviation mishap sign, because this was the day, because it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis. This was one sign that confirmed that analysis, that conclusion. Anyway, this was the day that NASA rolled out its Artemis space launch system onto the launch pad. It announced it at 11:17 p.m. The 1,117th word in the concordance is the word Bama. high place, like I just explained earlier. It was a 9-hour rollout. This was the same day that the populist politician in Pakistan was attempted to be assassinated with a 9mm pistol. He was rushed to the hospital in Lahore. The populist hints at Trump, who was the populist, and also Pakistan is South Asia. Kamala Harris is of South Asian descent, and she is widely known for getting her start in politics through being a whore with the mayor of San Francisco. And the prediction in this video will prove this. And anyway, this was flood symbolism, and in the account of Noah's flood, he gave Noah a 7 days warning before the flood judgment, and 7 days later was Hurricane Nicole, which had its highest wind speeds recorded at Kennedy Space Center, where the Artemis was still on the launch pad, because just like here, they didn't have enough time to get the Artemis back into the hangar, because Hurricane Nicole came out of nowhere. And so it's the same as this. And anyway, which confirms the connection. And so let me see. The highest wind speeds at Kennedy Space Center, because Kennedy was the who died while in office, just like Harris will die while in office. Kennedy was the 35th president. He died as he was in his car about to go onto the I-35 highway. And this is because Kamala Harris will die 35 days before it is predicted that Barack Obama will become the president again on November 21st, 2023. But anyway, in the account of the flood began in Genesis 7:11. And so that's why the 11 months and 7 days connection to the date 1017, which also hints at 2 1s and a 7, and on, okay, regarding the significance of the number 117 is what I mean. And by the way, you need to watch one of the foundational, most important videos, which I explain the significance of 117, which is titled Harris's plane will crash on the date 1017 equals eclipse peak at 1:17 p.m. Okay, because the eclipse peaked over St. Louis at 1:17 p.m. So make sure you watch that other video. And anyway, I think we are done explaining this amazing diagram. Now, what I have to say is that we didn't get into the real meaning for the prophetic signs in British Columbia. You need to watch part 2. So I'll leave a link to part 2 in the description box below, or you can find it on the other channel. Okay? The Canada Day Prophecy part 2. Make sure you watch it. And I want to really emphasize that. Part 2 is extremely important. It is the point. It is the point of all of this. If you only watch part 1, you have missed the point, the intention, the message that God is communicating through this July 1st, 2021 date and its signs. The diagram and the lead to the prediction of Kamala Harris's plane crash is one thing, but there's a purpose to this. And so you've missed the purpose if you don't watch part 2. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the BitChute.com or the Odyssey.com channel. And do it now in case you aren't able to later.